My name is Sal. I'm 70 years old, and up until a few months ago, my world had shrunk to the 4 floors of my Brooklyn brownstone and the patch of sky above its roof. My kids, Mark and Lisa, they see an old man in an old house with a silly, dirty hobby. That's what they call it. My pigeons, they see a lonely father who needs a proper, manageable pastime. Get a dog, Dad, Lisa would say, her voice dripping with that particular brand of pitying concern that feels more like a judgment. Mark would just nod, his eyes scanning the crown molding, probably calculating its resale value. They see a stubborn old man clinging to the past, rattling around in a house that's too big for him. A house they believe is their birthright, an asset waiting to be liquidated. What they don't see, what they've never bothered to see, is the lifeblood of this place. It's not in the brick and mortar, it's up on the roof, in the gentle cooing, the rustle of wings, the quiet, pulsing life of my flock. They see a coop. I see a kingdom. They see a nuisance, a health hazard, a mess of feathers and droppings. I see a 50-year legacy. These aren't common city pigeons, the kind that peck at discarded hot dog buns in the park. These are racing homers, a specific rare bloodline I have curated since I was a young man, a lineage of champions that stretches back half a century. The jewel of that lineage is a magnificent blue-bar cockbird I call the Admiral. He has eyes like fiery opals and a chest puffed with a pride that seems almost human. He's more than just a bird. He's the culmination of my life's work. A collector, a sheikh from Dubai, has been trying to buy him for 2 years. His emails are respectful, his offers astronomical. The last one was for more money than this brownstone, and the 2 next to it are worth. I always politely decline. You don't sell a masterpiece. You don't sell family. My kids know nothing of this. To them, my silly hobby is just another sign of my decline, another reason I need to be managed. Their visits had become less like family gatherings and more like inspections. Lisa would wrinkle her nose at the faint, earthy smell of bird feed that she imagined lingered in the hallway. Mark would tap the walls, looking for cracks, his mind already knocking them down and putting up drywall and recessed lighting. They wanted me out. They wanted to sell, and I was the only thing standing in their way. The day it all came to a head was a Tuesday. It was crisp and bright, the kind of early autumn day that makes the sky over the city seem impossibly blue. I was on the roof, enjoying the sun on my face, the birds wheeling overhead in a graceful ballet. It was my morning ritual, the most peaceful part of my day. Then the doorbell rang, a sharp, insistent chime that broke the spell. I sighed, knowing who it would be. They never called ahead anymore. They just appeared, like a weather system you couldn't predict but always dreaded. I descended the 4 flights of stairs, my knees complaining with every step. I opened the heavy oak door, and there they were. Mark, in a suit that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill, and Lisa clutching a designer handbag like a shield. But they weren't alone. Standing slightly behind them was a woman with a predatory smile and a clipboard. She looked like a shark that had just learned to walk on land. Mark clapped me on the shoulder, a gesture that was supposed to seem affectionate, but felt more like he was checking for structural integrity. Dad, good, you're here. We need to talk. Lisa chimed in, stepping past me into the foyer. We've brought someone we'd like you to meet. This is Brenda. She's the best realtor in the borough. Brenda the realtor extended a hand with nails like red daggers. I didn't take it. I just looked at my children. The ambush was so blatant, so disrespectful, it almost took my breath away. They had brought a stranger into my home to discuss its demise right in front of me. We're having a family meeting. Mark announced, herding us all toward the living room like we were his flock. Brenda's just here to offer some professional perspective. I didn't sit. I stood by the fireplace, my hand resting on the cool marble mantel my wife, Clara, had picked out 40 years ago. They sat on the sofa, a united front of pragmatic greed. Brenda launched into a slick presentation about market trends, comps, the potential for a bidding war. My house wasn't a home in her speech. It was a unit, an opportunity. A multi-million-dollar property being underutilized. Lisa took over when Brenda paused for breath. Dad, we've found the most wonderful senior community for you. It's secure. It has a meal plan, social activities. You wouldn't have to worry about a thing. I don't worry about a thing now, I said, my voice low. Mark sighed, the sound of a man burdened by an unreasonable parent. Dad, be realistic. This house is too much for you. The stairs, the upkeep, and the hobby. He gestured vaguely toward the ceiling. Brenda, the realtor, saw her opening. Yes, the rooftop structure, she said, consulting her notes. That would have to be professionally dismantled, and the area sanitized, of course. Most buyers see that sort of thing as a major liability. Flying rats, you know, flying rats. The words hung in the air, heavy and vile. She said it so casually, so dismissively, and my children just sat there. They nodded. And Mark nodded in agreement. Lisa in sympathy for the poor, imaginary buyer who would be so offended by my life's passion. In that moment, something inside me, something that had been slowly eroding for years under the constant drip of their condescension, finally broke. It wasn't a loud snap, but a quiet, cold severance. I looked at their faces, so full of concern that was really just impatience. They weren't worried about me. They were worried about their inheritance. They were circling my life, waiting for it to end, so theirs could get a little richer. They saw the coop as the final messy obstacle. My silly hobby, my flock, my admiral. They were just trash to be cleared away before the open house, and they had no idea. They had no idea that the flying rats on my roof were the only thing keeping their inheritance from flying the coop for good. I didn't say anything. I just let the silence stretch. I watched the greed and entitlement flicker in their eyes, and I made a decision. It wasn't about revenge, not yet. It was about survival, my legacy's survival. And if they happened to get caught in the fallout of their own making, well, that was a price I was suddenly willing to let them pay. After they left, leaving a brochure for the Golden Years senior residence on the coffee table like a calling card, the house felt cavernous and cold. The silence they left behind was different from the usual quiet. It was a hostile silence, ringing with the echoes of their words. Dismantled, sanitized, flying rats, my home, my life, reduced to a real estate problem to be solved. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step a deliberate act of defiance against their vision of me as a frail old man. I bypassed my own floor, heading straight for the narrow staircase that led to the roof. The moment I pushed the door open, the sound washed over me, a soft, throaty chorus of coos, a sound more comforting to me than any symphony. The air smelled of grain and clean wood shavings, and the particular, not unpleasant scent of the birds themselves. It was the smell of life, of purpose. I walked into the coop, the birds fluttering around me, unafraid. They knew my shape, my scent, my sound. A few landed on my shoulders, nuzzling against my neck. I ran my hand over the smooth weathered wood of a nesting box that I'd built with my own 2 hands when Mark was still in diapers. Every nail, every plank in this place was a memory. My gaze fell on the Admiral. He stood apart from the others, on his favorite perch, a king surveying his domain. His feathers shimmered, a slick, iridescent gray that looked like polished steel in the afternoon light. He turned his head, and one of his fiery eyes fixed on me. There was an intelligence there, a spirit that my own children refused to see. He wasn't just an animal. He was the culmination of a promise. My mind drifted back nearly 50 years. I was a scrawny 20-year-old kid working down at the docks, and I'd fallen in with a group of old Italian guys who kept pigeons. At one of them, a man named Mr. Giacomo with hands like gnarled oak became my mentor. He was a legend in the world of pigeon racing, a world I hadn't even known existed. He didn't just teach me how to feed and water them. He taught me about genetics, about instinct, about the invisible bond between a fancier and his birds. He taught me that it wasn't a hobby, it was an art. It's in the blood, Salvatore, he'd told me, his voice thick with a Sicilian accent. You don't just buy a champion, you create one, generation by generation. It takes patience, it takes love. When he was dying, he gifted me 2 pairs of his finest birds, his most treasured stock. Don't let the line end, Sal, he'd whispered from his hospital bed. You have the touch. Keep it going. And I did. I kept meticulous records, charting every pairing, every race, every hatchling. I spent countless hours just observing, learning the personalities and strengths of each bird. It was a science and a romance all at once. And Clara, my beautiful Clara, she had understood. When I'd nervously told her about my passion, back when we were first dating, she hadn't rolled her eyes. She'd smiled. I remembered one Saturday, not long after we'd bought this brownstone. It was a shell back then, all we could afford. I was on the roof, hammering together the first crude version of this coupe. She came up the ladder, holding 2 steaming mugs of coffee. She wasn't dressed for a construction site. She was in a pretty yellow dress. She didn't complain about the sawdust or the noise. She sat on an overturned bucket and watched me, her eyes full of affection. What will you name the first one born here? She'd asked. I don't know. Haven't thought about it. I'd grunted, struggling with a warped piece of lumber. How about Clara's pride? She'd said, with a little laugh. The first hen to hatch in that new coop was named Clara's Pride, and she was a champion. Clara would come up here with me on race days, her hand in mine, as we scanned the skies, waiting for that first speck on the horizon that meant one of our birds was coming home. When she got sick, and the stairs became too much for her, I would describe the races to her, telling her which of her grand birds was flying. The coop wasn't just a structure on my roof. It was a monument to our shared life, to her memory. How could I explain that to Mark and Lisa? To them she was a framed picture on the mantelpiece. To me she was in the grain of the wood, in the echo of the coos, in the very air I breathed up here. My passivity with them, my willingness to let their slights and digs roll off my back, it wasn't weakness. It was a desperate attempt to keep the peace, to preserve the sanctity of this place, and the memories it held. I wrote checks I knew I'd never see again. I paid for Mark's first condo down payment after his can't-miss tech startup went bust. I funded the obscenely expensive wedding Lisa insisted she deserved. They'd come to me with their hands out and their faces long, talking about pressures and expectations, and I would give in, because it was easier than fighting. It was easier than letting their grasping materialistic world breach the walls of this sanctuary. I was protecting Clara's memory from their modern brand of cynicism. I was the overlooked provider, the family ATM, and I had allowed it, because the alternative, the loud, ugly confrontation, felt like it would tarnish everything. But Brenda the realtor's words had tarnished it anyway. Flying rats. They had finally brought the ugliness right to my door and sat it down on my sofa. I pulled my old flip phone from my pocket. It was the only kind of cell phone I'd ever wanted. I had another one, a smartphone the sheikh's assistant had sent me, but I kept it hidden away in a desk drawer. I scrolled through my contacts to Artie, my oldest friend. He was the only other person left from the old days, the only one who understood. But before I called him, my thumb hovered over my email icon. I rarely checked it. It was mostly junk mail and notices from the utility company. But I knew there would be one email, maybe more, from a name that my children would never recognize. Farouk Al-Jamil. I opened the app, and there it was, an email from his aide, sent just last week. The subject line was simple, regarding the Admiral. The message was, as always, impeccably polite. It spoke of the Sheikh's unwavering admiration for my mastery of the art. It mentioned his dream of establishing a world-class racing loft in Dubai, and then it restated the offer. I stared at the number. It had 7 figures, and the first one wasn't a 1. A cold clarity washed over me, sharp and absolute, as a shard of glass. For 2 years I had seen that number as a temptation to be resisted, a threat to the integrity of my passion. But now, sitting here in my sanctuary that my own children wanted to bulldoze, I saw it for what it was. It wasn't a price tag. It was a weapon. It was leverage. It was freedom. My kids thought they were playing chess, moving their realtor and their senior living brochures into position to checkmate the lonely old king. They had no idea I was holding a card that could flip the whole board over. The despair that had settled in my chest began to burn away, replaced by something else. A resolve as hard and pure as diamond. The game was on. They just didn't know I was about to change all the rules. The long-suffering, quiet, accommodating dad they knew was gone. He had left the building the moment they'd nodded in agreement with the words "flying rats." In his place was Sal, the master breeder, and he was about to show his children the true value of his silly, dirty hobby. The first call I made wasn't to the sheikh, it was to Artie. I didn't even say hello when he picked up. "They're trying to sell the house out from under me, Artie." I could hear him sputtering on the other end. "What? Those vultures? I knew it. I told you, Sal. I told you they see you as a walking, talking bank account. They brought a realtor to my house without telling me." I explained the whole sordid meeting, ending with Brenda, the realtor's 2-word assessment of my life's work. Artie let out a string of curses in Italian that would have made Mr. Giacomo blush. "That's it, Sal. The line has been crossed. You can't be the nice guy anymore. The nice guy gets his coop dismantled and put in a home that smells like bleach and regret." "I know, Artie. I know," I said, feeling a surge of gratitude for his unwavering, unfiltered loyalty. "That's why I'm calling you. I'm going to need help. Anything. You name it. You want me to go down there and talk to that son of yours? My cousin Vinny still owes me a favor." I chuckled, a dry, rusty sound. No, nothing like that. I need a different kind of favor. Your son, the lawyer. Is he any good? Anthony, he's a shark, Sal. A pinstripe predator. What do you need? I need a shark of my own, I said. That's how I found myself, 2 days later, sitting in a sleek, minimalist office that felt like it belonged in a science fiction movie. It was all glass and steel, with a view of the Manhattan skyline that was probably worth more than my entire brownstone. Anthony, who insisted I call him Tony, was nothing like his father. He was young, sharp, and wore a suit so perfectly tailored it looked like it had been painted on. He listened intently, his fingers steepled, as I laid out the whole story. I told him about the house, my kids, the 50-year history of the birds, and finally, about the sheikh and his offer. I left nothing out. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment, just looking at me. I started to feel a familiar pang of doubt, the worry that he too would see a sentimental old fool. "Mr. Romano," he began, and I knew from the mister that this was serious. "Let's be very clear. Your children have no legal right to sell your property. The deed is solely in your name. They cannot force you into a senior living facility. Their plan is based entirely on emotional manipulation and bullying. Legally, they have no ground to stand on. I know, I said, but they're not going to stop. No, they won't, Tony agreed. Which is why we aren't just going to play defense. We're going to build a fortress. First thing tomorrow, we are establishing a living trust. You will be the sole trustee. We will transfer ownership of the brownstone and your other primary assets into this trust. This makes it even more difficult for anyone to challenge your control, especially with baseless claims of incompetence. He was already scribbling on a legal pad. Next, your birds. You refer to it as a hobby. From this moment on, it is no longer a hobby. It is a business. We will form a limited liability company. Agency Homers LLC, you said, for Sal and Clara. I like that. We'll open a corporate bank account. All future income, all expenses, everything related to the flock goes through the LLC. We professionalize it. We legitimize it. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I didn't even realize I'd been carrying. For years I'd been on the defensive, justifying my passion. Tony was turning it into an offensive strategy. Now about this sheikh, he said, leaning forward. This is your leverage. This is the cannon that blows their rowboat out of the water. But we must be strategic. Agreeing to sell the admiral right away is short-sighted. The bird is the golden goose. You don't sell the goose, you sell the eggs. He was echoing a thought I'd already had, but hearing it from him, in this context, made it feel real and powerful. I was thinking, I began, I could offer to sell him some of the admiral's offspring, and maybe a few other proven birds, a starter kit for his new loft, and I could offer my services as a consultant to guide him. Tony's face broke into a wide grin. It was the first time he'd looked like Artie's son. Sal, that's not just good, that's brilliant. We're not just selling pigeons, we're selling intellectual property. Your 50 years of expertise. We'll draft a contract for an initial sale and a 1-year consulting retainer, and we will ask for a number that will make their eyes water. He told me to go home and get the burner smartphone the sheikh's aide had sent me. All future communication would happen through that device, using an encrypted messaging app. He gave me a list of documents to gather: the deed to the house, old bank statements, tax returns. As I was leaving, he put a hand on my arm. One more thing, Sal. Your son, Mark. You mentioned you gave him a supplementary credit card for emergencies. Yes, a long time ago. He's supposed to just use it if something major comes up. I want you to get me the last 12 months of statements for that card, Tony said, his eyes glinting. Let's see what he defines as an emergency. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. While my children were likely congratulating themselves on planting the seed of my eviction, I was building my fortress, brick by legal brick. I spent hours in Tony's office, signing documents that created trusts and LLCs. I opened a new bank account in the name of S&C Homers, a name that made my heart ache with a bittersweet pride. Clara would have loved this. She would have called it our little empire. I dug out the old credit card statements. As I laid them out on my dining room table, a cold fury settled in my gut. Mark's emergencies included $500 dinners at steakhouses, weekend trips to the Hamptons, designer clothes, and a recurring monthly charge for a golf club I didn't even know he belonged to. It was thousands upon thousands of dollars. Theft, plain and simple, disguised as familial support. I photocopied every single one and sent them to Tony. The most difficult part was composing the message to the sheikh. With Tony's guidance, I crafted a careful proposal. I explained that I could not part with the admiral, as he was the heart of my flock and held deep sentimental value. However, I was so impressed by the sheikh's dedication that I was willing to help him achieve his goal. I offered him 3 pairs of birds, all direct descendants of the admiral, and a 1-year exclusive consulting contract. I would guide him on everything from loft design to breeding strategy. Then, I named my price. It was a bold, audacious number, nearly a quarter of what he'd offered for the admiral alone. I typed it out, my hand trembling slightly, and pressed send. The reply came less than an hour later. Your proposal is intriguing, Mr. Romano. Your terms are acceptable. My financial team will be in touch with yours to arrange the wire transfer. I am most grateful for this opportunity to learn from a master. I stared at the screen. My terms are acceptable. Just like that. A lifetime of being told my passion was silly, worthless, and an eccentric old sheikh on the other side of the world had just validated it in a way my own blood never had. I started making changes at the brownstone too. The first was small, but deeply satisfying. I called a locksmith and had every single lock on the exterior doors changed. The old keys, the ones Mark and Lisa had for emergencies, were now just useless pieces of metal. Then I hired a contractor, a young, eager guy Artie recommended. But I wasn't hiring him to dismantle the coop. I was hiring him to expand and upgrade it. We designed a new section, a royal suites for the admiral and his chosen hens, with heated perches and a special ventilation system. From the street, all anyone could see was scaffolding and construction. It must be happening, they must have thought. The old man is finally giving in. They had no idea. They thought they were watching a demolition. What they were really witnessing was the building of a throne. The silence was the first weapon I deployed. It was surprisingly effective. In the past, their calls and texts, filled with passive-aggressive concern and unsolicited advice, would trigger a knot of anxiety in my stomach. I'd feel compelled to answer, to defend myself, to manage their feelings. Not anymore. Now, I just let the phone buzz on the counter. I'd glance at the screen, mark Mobile Elisa's, and feel a strange sense of calm. The power was in not picking up. Their messages started as they always did. Hey Dad, just checking in. Hope you're thinking about what we discussed. Brenda says the market is peaking. That was Lisa. Mark was more direct. Dad, call me. We need to make a plan. I was busy making a plan. My plan. The wire transfer from Dubai hit the new S&C Homers LLC bank account. I stared at the balance on the computer screen. It was an abstract, beautiful number. It felt less like money and more like ammunition. My first act was to transfer a significant chunk into my new personal trust account. My second was to go to my old bank, the one Mark and Lisa had access to, and systematically drain it, leaving only a few $100s behind. My third, and most satisfying move, was a call to the credit card company. Yes, I'd like to cancel a supplementary card on my account, I said, my voice steady. The name is Mark Romano. I imagined the moment. Mark, at some fancy restaurant trying to impress a client. The smooth, confident gesture of handing over the card. The waiter returning, a flicker of embarrassment on his face. I'm sorry, sir. The card has been declined. The petty satisfaction it gave me was immense. It didn't take long for the panicked calls to begin. This time I listened to the voicemails. Dad, it's Mark. Something weird is going on with the card. It was declined at lunch. It was really embarrassing. Can you call the bank? I think their system is down. An hour later, another one. Dad, seriously, pick up. I tried calling the bank myself, but they wouldn't talk to me. They said the primary cardholder canceled the account. What the hell is going on? Did you do this? The confusion was turning to anger. Then came Lisa. Dad, what's happening? Mark told me you canceled his card, and the monthly transfer you sent me didn't come through.
Did you forget? My mortgage payment is due. Call me back. This isn't funny. They weren't allowances. They were gifts I gave freely because I thought it helped them. But listening to her now, I realized they weren't gifts. They were expectations. My financial support was something they felt entitled to, a tap they could turn whenever they needed. I had just turned it off at the main. Their duet of frantic messages continued for days. They drove by the house. I saw them from the second-floor window, peering up at the scaffolding on the roof. Mark was on his phone, pacing the sidewalk, his face a mask of frustration. Lisa was gesturing wildly at the construction. They probably thought I was spending my last dime on a foolish project before they could get their hands on it. The climax of their panic came on a Saturday morning. I was in the kitchen, enjoying a cup of coffee and reading the paper, when I heard a key scrape in the lock of the front door, a furious, fruitless sound. It was followed by a loud, insistent banging. I walked to the window and peered through the blinds. It was both of them, their faces red and contorted. Mark was rattling the doorknob like a madman. Lisa was hammering on the wood with her fist. "Dad, I know you're in there. Open this door," Mark yelled. "What is wrong with you?" Lisa shrieked. "Are you a prisoner in your own home? Let us in." I just stood there watching. It was like watching a nature documentary about predators who'd found the watering hole had suddenly run dry. They were confused, angry, and desperate. They were locked out, not just from the house, but from my life, my money, my compliance. The fortress was holding. After 10 minutes of their tantrum, they finally gave up and stormed back to their car. I watched them go, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt a sense of profound peace. The noise was outside. Inside there was only silence. But I knew them. They wouldn't give up. They were just regrouping. They had one more card to play, the cruelest one in the deck, and I knew they wouldn't hesitate to use it. They were about to escalate this from a financial dispute to an all-out war on my sanity. I went to the phone and called Tony. They tried to get in, I told him. Then they stood on the sidewalk and screamed at the house. "Good," Tony said, his voice calm. "Let them flail. It's all they've got left." "No," I said, "it's not. They're going to try to have me declared incompetent, aren't they?" There was a pause on the other end. "It's a common tactic for greedy children, Sal. Be prepared, easy." Quotes. The attack came a week later, not with a bang, but with a polite knock on the door. I opened it to find a pleasant-looking man in a rumpled suit holding a city-issued ID. "Mr. Salvatore Romano?" he asked. "I'm Sal," I said. "My name is David Henderson. I'm with Adult Protective Services. We received an anonymous call expressing concern for your welfare. May I come in for a moment?" The low blow, the absolute final betrayal. My own children had called the authorities, painting me as a senile old man, a danger to himself, all in a desperate gambit to seize control. For a second a white-hot rage flared in my chest, but then Tony's voice echoed in my head. "Be prepared for it." I smiled, a warm, welcoming smile. "Of course, Mr. Henderson. Please come in. Would you care for a cup of coffee?" I led him into the living room. It was spotless. Clary had always insisted on a clean house, and I kept up the habit. He sat on the sofa, the very spot where my children had sat with their realtor, and looked around, his expression unreadable. "So, someone is concerned about me?" I asked, setting a cup of coffee down in front of him. "The report mentions self-neglect, confusion, and concerns about the safety of your living conditions," he said, his tone gentle but professional. I nodded slowly. "I see. I imagine this concern comes from the same people who recently tried to have me sell my home and move into a facility, and who were upset when I changed my locks and canceled the credit card they'd been using for personal luxuries." Mr. Henderson raised an eyebrow. "You know, Mr. Henderson," I continued, "it's a funny thing. My children think my lifelong passion is a silly hobby. They think I'm just a lonely old man. Would you like to see my silly hobby?" I led him up the 4 flights of stairs.
He was breathing a little heavily by the time we reached the top. I pushed open the door to the roof. The new expanded coop gleamed in the sunlight. It was a marvel of craftsmanship, clean, airy, and modern. The birds cooed softly. It didn't look like the lair of a confused old man. It looked like a world-class aviary. "This is quite the setup, Mr. Romano," he said, genuinely impressed. "It's my business," I said plainly, "and the Sheikh Homers LLC. We breed and sell champion racing pigeons to clients around the world." I pulled out my phone, the smart one, and showed him the website Tony's people had built. It featured professional photographs of the Admiral and his progeny, testimonials from other fanciers, and a summary of my 50 years of experience. Then I put my phone on the coffee table in my little rooftop office and hit the speakerphone button. "Tony, are you there?" I asked. "I'm here, Sal," came the crisp reply. "Is Mr. Henderson with you?" "He is, Mr. Henderson," Tony said, his voice filling the small room with authority. "My name is Anthony Gallo. I am Mr. Romano's attorney. I assume you are there in response to a malicious and fraudulent report filed by my client's children, Mark and Lisa Romano. A report filed only after Mr. Romano, upon my advice, took steps to protect his assets from their financial exploitation. I have copies of credit card statements detailing thousands of dollars in unauthorized personal spending by Mark Romano, and I am currently drafting a letter to the district attorney regarding this matter, as well as the filing of a false report with your agency, which I'm sure you know is a criminal offense." Mr. Henderson's eyes widened. He looked from the phone to me, to the impressive coupe, and back again. I handed him a thin file folder. Inside was a copy of the LLC formation documents and a printout of the new corporate bank account statement showing the recent 7-figure deposit from Dubai. He stared at the paper for a full 30 seconds. He slowly closed the folder and handed it back to me. He stood up and extended his hand. This time I took it. "Mr. Romano," he said, his voice full of a new respect, "I am so very sorry to have wasted your time. It is abundantly clear that you are perfectly fine. In fact, I'd say you're doing better than fine. You have a beautiful home and a fascinating business." He glanced at Tony's name on the file. "I will be sure to note in my report that the initial call was in all likelihood made in bad faith. You won't be hearing from us again." After he left, I stood on the roof for a long time, watching my birds circle in the clear blue sky. The power had well and truly shifted. My children had fired their last, most vicious shot, and it had ricocheted right back at them. They had no moves left. It was my turn to call the meeting. I had Tony send the email. It was short and formal. "Mr. Salvatore Romano requests your presence at a meeting to discuss family assets. The meeting will be held at our offices at 10 a.m. on Friday. Your attendance is mandatory." He sent it to both Mark and Lisa. There was no room for negotiation. It was a summons. They arrived at Tony's office separately, but with the same look on their faces, a mixture of defiance and apprehension. They looked small and out of place in the vast, intimidating conference room. They had clearly expected to find me there alone, a lamb to be slaughtered. Instead, they found me sitting at the head of a long, polished table, with Tony beside me, a neat stack of files in front of him. The power dynamic was clear from the moment they walked in.
Hey!
They were no longer the ones in charge. Lisa tried to take control immediately, her voice high and strained. "Dad, this is ridiculous. Forcing us to come to a lawyer's office after you locked us out and cut us off. What have you gotten yourself into? This man is clearly taking advantage of you."
Hey!
Mark jumped in, pointing a finger at Tony. "I don't know what you've been telling him, but my father is not in his right mind. He's confused. We were only trying to help him. I held up a hand, a simple gesture, but it silenced them. The old Sal would have let them talk, would have tried to placate them. The new Sal had the floor. "Help me?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "Is that what you call it?" Was bringing a realtor to my home without my permission helping? Was calling Adult Protective Services and lying to them about my mental state helping? Their faces paled. They hadn't known I knew who made the call. Or maybe, I continued looking directly at Mark, was using my credit card to rack up over $40,000 in charges for golf clubs and fancy dinners over the last year. Your idea of helping me manage my finances. Tony slid a thick stack of photocopied statements across the table toward Mark. His face went from white to a blotchy red. He couldn't even look at it. "You see," I said, my voice calm and steady, "for a long time I let you believe what you wanted to believe. That I was a dotty old man with a silly hobby. That this house was just a pile of money waiting for you. That I was your personal bank to be drawn from whenever you felt the need. I let you believe it because it was easier than facing the truth that my own children see me, not as a father but as an obstacle to their inheritance." I paused, letting the words sink in. Lisa opened her mouth to speak, a protest forming on her lips, but I cut her off. "But you made a mistake. You underestimated me, and you wildly, catastrophically underestimated my hobby." Tony slid another, more handsome portfolio into the center of the table. It was bound in blue leather, with Set and C Homers, LLC, embossed in gold on the cover. "What is this?" Lisa asked, her voice a near whisper. "That," I said, "is my business. The business you wanted dismantled and sanitized. The one built on the backs of flying rats." Mark opened it hesitantly. Inside were glossy, professional photos of the Admiral and my other champion birds. There were copies of their pedigrees, lineage charts going back decades. There was a copy of the consulting contract I had signed with Sheikh El-Jamil, and on the final page there was a certified statement of the current balance in the S&C Homer's corporate bank account. I watched their eyes scan the page. I saw the exact moment they registered the number, the flicker of disbelief, then confusion, then a dawning, sickening comprehension. Mark's jaw went slack. Lisa's hand flew to her mouth. The figure on that page was more money than either of them would likely see in their lifetimes. "The Admiral," I said softly. "The bird you found so embarrassing. The Sheikh's standing offer for him alone is more than my brownstone is worth. My silly hobby, as it turns out, is a multi-million-dollar international enterprise. An enterprise you wanted to destroy." I leaned back in my chair. The vindication was not a fiery, triumphant feeling. It was a cold, quiet satisfaction. It was the feeling of a chessboard being swept clean. The inheritance you were so worried about, so eager to get your hands on, is gone. I told them. Tony pushed one last document toward them. It was the summary of my new living trust. Everything, the house, the business, my personal savings, is in the trust. And when I'm gone, it will not be distributed to you. 100% of the Romano estate will be transferred to a new charitable foundation I am establishing in your mother's name, the Clara Romano Foundation for the Preservation of Avian Legacy. It will fund research and support young pigeon fanciers who have the passion but not the means, the very people who understand the value of what I do. I stood up. The meeting concluded. "You wanted me to find a new purpose, something to keep me busy. I have. It's called philanthropy. You wanted my house. You can't have it. You wanted my money. You've had your last dime. All you had to do was show a little respect. All you had to do was be a son, a daughter. But you chose to be vultures, and now there's nothing left to pick over." They just sat there, stunned into silence. The glossy pages of the portfolio spread out before them like the wreckage of their own greed. I turned and walked out of the room without looking back. The sound of the heavy door clicking shut behind me was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. In the weeks and months that followed, a new kind of quiet settled over my life. It wasn't the silence of loneliness. It was the silence of peace. The frantic, demanding noise of my children's expectations was gone, replaced by the gentle cooing on the roof and the hum of a life rebuilt on my own terms. They tried to reach out, of course. There were tearful, pleading voicemails, apologies that sounded more like business proposals. They tried to bargain, to repent, to rewrite history. I never responded. Some things, once broken, can't be fixed. Trust is one of them. My life is fuller now than it has been in years. I spend my mornings on the roof, not as a lonely old man, but as the CEO of my small, unique empire. I have bi-weekly video calls with the sheikh's team in Dubai, advising them on the new loft they've built to my specifications. They treat me with a reverence that is both humbling and validating. They call me Professor Sal. A young boy from the neighborhood, a quiet kid named Leo, started hanging around, fascinated by the birds. He reminded me of myself at his age. I took him under my wing, teaching him the way Mr. Giacomo taught me. I let him hold one of the Admiral's new hatchlings, a tiny trembling ball of life. The look of wonder on his face was worth more than any dollar amount in any bank account. He is the first unofficial recipient of the Clara Romano Foundation's support. Last week I saw a for sale sign go up in front of Lisa's house. I heard through Artie that Mark's business is struggling. The well has run dry, and they are facing the consequences of a lifestyle built on a foundation of my money. I take no joy in their struggle, but I feel no guilt either. Their choices were their own. It was never about punishing them with poverty. It was about rewarding myself with peace. So now, here I am. I'm Sal, 70 years old, and my world is the 4 floors of my Brooklyn brownstone and the limitless sky above it. My kids thought my rooftop pigeon coop was a silly, dirty hobby for a lonely old man. They were wrong. It was my salvation. It was my legacy. It was the quiet, feathered fortress that protected me from their greed. It was never about the money. Not really. It was about respect. It was about a promise I made to an old man, and a love I shared with my wife. They saw a bunch of birds on a roof. I saw 50 years of my life, and I learned a valuable lesson. Sometimes the things in your life that other people dismiss as silly or worthless are the very things that hold your greatest strength. They are the things that define you. Don't ever let anyone take that away from you. Cherish your passions, whatever they may be. Protect them, because you never know when your silly little hobby might just be the thing that saves you. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever had a passion that someone else didn't understand, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more stories like mine. It means a lot to know there are people out there who are willing to listen.